Hi everyone, welcome to Geometry Lesson 6-4, Properties of Special Parallelograms. Now the first thing that you're going to do for this lesson is in your notes, you're going to try to write down as many properties of parallelograms you can think of. So pause the video, write down as many as you can think of, and then press play to check to see if you got all of them. Okay, so the properties of parallelograms are that both pairs of opposite sides are parallel, meaning the red sides are parallel and the blue sides are parallel. Next, we have both pairs of opposite sides are congruent. So the red sides are congruent and the blue sides are congruent. Now, just a side note, it doesn't matter if the red side is congruent to the blue side. What matters is the two red sides have the same number of tick marks. The two blue sides have the same number of tick marks. Next, it says both pairs of opposite angles are congruent. So angle A needs to be congruent to angle C. Angle B needs to be congruent to angle D. Now, another side note, A and D could be equal. Doesn't matter. What matters is the ones that are across from each other have to be equal. Next, we need to know that consecutive angles are supplementary, meaning angle A is supplementary to angle B, and angle A is supplementary to angle D. Okay, so all of the consecutive angle pairs are supplementary. And finally, if I was to draw the diagonals in here, they would cut each other in half. And what that means is that this yellow segment from B to this middle part is the same length as this yellow segment here from that middle part to D. And from A to the middle is equal from the middle to C. So right where these cross is going to be the midpoint of both the yellow line and the black line. That's what it means for the diagonals to bisect. Now, we're going to pause the video again while you answer another question. The question is, what is a rectangle? Now, everybody knows what a rectangle looks like, but I'm asking you, what is a rectangle? So pause the video, answer the question, then press play to see what a rectangle is and what special properties it has. A rectangle is a quadrilateral with four right angles. So anytime you see a four-sided shape with four right angles in it, it's going to be a rectangle. Now, it doesn't matter how long this side is and how long this side is. They could be the same length. It doesn't matter. It's still a rectangle as long as you have the four right angles with a four-sided shape. Now, the properties of a rectangle is that it's a special type of parallelogram. This means that all of those parallelogram properties that we just reviewed apply to rectangles. All of them. Every single one. The other interesting thing about rectangles is that the diagonals are congruent. Okay, so that means that this black diagonal is the same length, the total length of the black diagonal is equal to the total length of the blue diagonal. Now, just as a side note, remember, these diagonals bisect each other. So this length from here to here is equal to this length from here to the edge. And both of those lengths are actually equal to both of these black lengths as well. So that is what happens with those diagonals. Now, we're going to do an example. And in this example, you're going to be given a rectangle. And the way you figure it out is you look at the rectangle, you look at what they're asking about, and you pick one of the properties about a rectangle that would apply, or about a parallelogram, because remember, this property says that all of the properties of parallelograms apply. So pick the property that applies, create an equation if you need to, and then solve for your missing measurement. In example 1, it says in rectangle EFGH, FG is 24, so this top length is 24, and FH, this total diagonal length, is 34. They want you to find JG. So pause the video, try and figure out which fact applies, or multiple facts, and see if you can figure out JG. Then press play to check your answer. Now, because FH is 34, and I know the diagonals of a rectangle are congruent, I know that EG is also 34 inches. Now, I know that J is the midpoint of EG, So I just have to do half of 34, which is 17. And JG is going to be 17 inches. That's my answer for this one. So I have two more questions for you. I have a gate that's in a rectangular shape, and these braces are the diagonals. Okay, LJ is 30.8 inches and GK is 48 inches. So you're going to find HJ and you're going to find HK. Okay, so pause the video, find both of those, and then press play to see if your answers are correct. Okay, so for HJ, it is one of the sides of the rectangle, and I know the opposite side is 48 inches. So HJ is 48 inches. And for HK, I'm going to use similar logic to what we used in the last example. This is 30.8. So if I double it, it's going to be the total length here, which is going to be 61.6. And HK is going to be equal to that, so 61.6 is my answer. Okay, so that's it for that check it out question. Now, I have another question for you. Of course, lots of questions. So my question is, what do you remember about a rhombus? Do you remember what it is? Do you remember any of its properties? So in your notebook, write down what is a rhombus and anything you can remember about rhombuses, and then press play to see what we have for a definition and its properties. Okay, so a rhombus is a quadrilateral four-sided shape with four congruent sides, meaning that each side is congruent to all of the other sides. So four sides that are all congruent will be a rhombus every single time. And I know what some of you are thinking. You're thinking about squares, but don't worry, we're going to talk about those later. Now, that is one of its properties. Next, it is also a special type of parallelogram. So again, all of those parallelogram properties apply. So that's why we wrote them down at the beginning, because they apply to everything. Now, the diagonals, these blue lines are the diagonals, and they are perpendicular. They're not equal, but they are perpendicular. They meet at a 90-degree angle. And the diagonals bisect these angles. So everywhere where they meet a corner, the angles cut exactly in half. So all of these angles are bisected. And you'll notice the arc marks. These two angles are equal to these two angles. These two angles are equal to these two, because the opposite angles are also congruent. Okay, so it creates lots of interesting things you can look at in here. You have the four triangles created by the diagonals, this one, this one, this one, and this one. You could even just draw one diagonal and create the big triangle up here that is isosceles, or the big triangle down here. So there's lots of triangles to look at. So don't forget what we learned about triangles when you're doing your examples. So let's take a look at our first example for this. In example 2a, it says RSTV is a rhombus. Find the measure of VT. Now that is a side length, but notice they haven't given us any information about VT. But you have to identify the property about the sides of a rhombus. And that's that the rhombus has all equal sides. So this 4x plus 7 equals this 9x minus 11, which is the same thing as VT. Okay, so you're going to create an expression, solve for x, and then evaluate. You're going to take your value of x and put it into one of the expressions to find the length that's missing. Pause the video and do that, and then press play to check your answer. Okay, so I wrote 4x plus 7 equals 9x minus 11 because the sides are equal. Then I solved by subtracting the 4x to this side, and I added 11. And then I divided by 5. So x is 3.6. Now, I took it and put it into the 4x plus 7, but you can put it into the other one. Either way, you should get 21.4 for the measurement that you need. Let's do another example. Okay, in this example, it says RSTV is a rhombus, and they want you to find the measure of angle WSR. So that's this angle here. There are a few properties that you need to know. Remember, this angle is going to be equal to this y plus 2 angle. But is y plus 2 equal to this? Think about that. What's true about how the diagonals meet? What kind of angle do they meet at? So you're going to pause the video, see if you can remember what's true about this angle, and create an expression and solve for, in this case, y. I forgot to change this to a y. Sorry about that. Solve for y. Okay, then press play to check your answer, and I'll show you how to do the last step. Okay, so I remembered that these two diagonals meet at a 90-degree angle. So 2y plus 10 is 90 degrees. I just subtracted 10, then divided by 2, so y is 40. Now, to find the angle measurement, I can use this angle here, because remember, these two angles are equal. So I just do 40 plus 2 to find my last measurement. So it is 42 degrees. Okay, now you have some questions to do on your own. So pause the video, solve for 2a and 2b, and then press play to check your answers. Okay, in part A, I knew that 5a equals 3a plus 17 because they're side lengths, and so is CD. So if I solve for a, I can find a side length, and that's going to be all of the side lengths. So I did 5a equals 3a plus 17. I found out that a is 8.5. And then I just did 5 times 8.5 to get 42.5 for this length. So 42.5 is all of these side lengths. Now in part B, this one was much trickier. They gave you this whole angle. The big angle here is b plus 3, and the big angle up here is 6b minus 40. Now remember, a rhombus has all of the properties of a parallelogram. So these two angles, the two angles there, are supplementary. So you add these two expressions together, and it's going to equal 180 degrees. Now when you add them, you get 7b minus 37 equals 180. B comes out to be 31, and then what we're going to do is we're going to take that and put it into the b plus 3, because that's the whole angle here. So that's 34, but I only wanted this half of the angle. So 34 divided by 2 is 17, and 17 is your final answer. So just to recap, these add to 180. So this plus this equals 180. You solve for b, and b is 31. I took 31 and put it into the expression for this angle. 31 plus 3 is 34. So the big angle here is 34, but I only wanted half the angle. So I divided by 2 to get 17. So we have one more special type of parallelogram to talk about, but we're going to do that on a separate video. So before you leave, before you start the next video, write down everything you can think about what a square is. Write down anything you know about squares, and then start the next video.